Good day. So today we're going to be working on last year's prelim exam paper. We're going to be working on question 1, which is basically 21 marks of the paper. I expect everyone to accumulate most of their marks from this question because it's usually just basic mathematics. So without any further ado, let's get straight into it. Right, so we're going to start with question 1.1.1. Right, so this requires us to solve for x. The question says solve for x, so we're going to be doing 1.1.1, where they gave us a sum which is 3x squared minus 4x is equals to 0. Right, so in this situation, they require us to solve for x. So the first thing we're going to do is, obviously, we have 3x squared minus 4x, and we have our common factor, which is x on both sides, on both terms. So we're going to factor out x. Now we have 3x minus 4 is equal to 0, right? So how we usually factor out x, or what we get, what we know is remaining after we factorize x, is we say 3x squared minus divided by x, we have 3x, minus we have 4x divided by x, and then we have 4, right? So in this case, we're going to have two terms. The first term, we're going to say x is equals to 0, or 3x minus 4 is equals to 0, right? So we can still solve this further. We're going to say 3x is equals to 4, and then we're going to divide both sides by 3 since we're looking for x, and then we have x is equals to 4 over 3. So both your answers will be x is equals to 0 or x is equals to 4 over 3. So now we're going to solve 1.1.2, which says where we're given an equation, 3x squared plus 10 minus 4 is equals to 0, and we're given a clue in a way. They say correct to 2 decimal places. So every single time you're told to correct to 2 decimal places, what they're telling you is that you can't solve for x by factorizing. So you can't get your value by factorizing. So there's only one equation that we can use in order for us to find the value of x. So this equation says x is equals to minus b plus minus all square root of b squared minus 4ac. This is 4ac all over 2a, right? So this equation will be in your information sheet, right? So our general equation to solving quadratic equations is ax squared plus bx plus c. C is our constant. Obviously, we have our ax squared plus bx, and we just need to substitute these values, right? So we know that our a is equals to 3, our b is equal to 10, and obviously our c will be equal to negative 4. So we're just going to substitute that into the equation and solve it. So we have minus our b is 10, just going to put that inside a bracket, plus minus square root of b is 10 again, squared, minus 4, our a is 3, and our c is negative 4. Our c is negative 4. All over 2, our a is 3, right? So now we're just going to clean that up. We know that that's 10 plus minus, we know that inside the bracket we have 10 squared, which is 100. 10 squared, which is 100. We have negative 4 multiplied by 3, which is negative 12. Multiplied by negative 12 multiplied by negative 4, which will give us positive 48. Positive 48. And obviously we're going to square root that. And all over 6, since 2 times 3 is 6, right? So to clean that up a bit further, we have negative 10 plus minus square root of 148 all over 6, right? So now that we're here, we're obviously going to say x is equals to minus 10 plus square root of 148 over 6, or x is equals to minus 10 minus square root of 148 over 6. So we're just going to type that into our calculator, and we're going to get two values of x. Obviously, the one with a plus will have a bigger value, and the one with a minus will obviously have a smaller value. So we're just going to type that into our calculator and find our final value. and we're just going to round that value into 2 decimal places, and we'll basically be done with the question, and that's full marks. So we're going to jump straight into the next question, 1.1.3, which is an inequality, and we are given an expression 15x minus 4 is less than and 9x squared. So we're going to take the 9 to the other side. Now we have minus 9x squared plus 15x minus 4 is less than 0. So we're going to multiply everything by -1 just to make this term positive. So when we multiply that, we have 9x squared minus 15x plus 4. So here, in every case, when we multiply an inequality by a negative value, what we're going to do is we're going to change the sign. Since it was saying less than, now we say greater than 0. Right? So we're going to try to solve that by obviously starting with our skeleton. Then we're going to put 3x here, 3x here. So now this is a little trick thing into solving trinomials when it comes to signs. So the positive, this positive 4 right here, tells us that both signs that we're going to put here have to be the same. Since the only way we can get a positive value is if we multiply negative with a negative or positive with a positive. The second sign, which is negative 15x, this negative right here, tells us that the sign needs to be both negative. So if it was a positive 15, that means the signs will be positive. But since they're negative, the signs are positive. So I repeat, the plus 4 tells us that the plus here on the 4 tells us that the signs have to be the same. So it's either negative and negative or positive and positive, whereas the negative tells us that the signs will be negative and negative. So now we're basically going to find the factors of 4. I think it's 4 and 1. There's a process in that. You can just watch the video on solving trinomials, and then you're gonna find all the steps and tricks into solving trinomials from there, right? So when we're here, I like to also use this tricky thing where I say I put x in the middle, and then I have both signs facing where this sign is facing, right? So now I put the big value on this side, so I know my big value will be 4/3. I know my small value will be 1/3. So this is basically your final answer, but many teachers don't prefer you leave your answer like this. So how you leave your answer from here, you can write this in your mini book, and then how you leave your answer. How the teachers prefer you leave your answer. So we know that x is less than 1/3, but x is greater than 4/3. So since it's less than 1/3, we just say x is less than 1/3, or x is greater than 4/3. So that's basically how you're supposed to leave your answer. So we can always erase this here. We can always erase this here. I know you guys have different steps in solving an inequality, but that's basically my short way of solving inequalities. So this will be your final answer. So going into the next question, which is 1.1.4. 1.1.4 says the square root of x squared minus 5 is equals to 2 square root of x. Right? So the first step that we're gonna make here is obviously squaring both sides. So we're gonna square both sides. So now we have x squared minus 5 squared is equals to 2 square root of x, and we're gonna square both sides. So this side we're gonna have x minus 5, x squared minus 5, and then the other side we're gonna have 4x. Right? So we're gonna take this 4x to the other side. Now we have x squared minus 4x minus 5 is equals to 0. Since we took it to the other side, we know that it will change signs, so we have a negative value. So from here we just factorize back to our skeleton. Since our coefficient is 1 here, we just say x, and then as I said, this sign right here, -5, it tells us that if it's a negative value, it tells us that the signs will be different, right? This one tells us that the signs will be different. This one, the negative here, tells us that since it's -4, tells us that the bigger number. So now we're going to be solving 1.2. That says 3x minus y all squared plus x minus 5 all squared is equal to 0. So this is kind of a weird equation because obviously it's not a simultaneous equation since we only have one equation, and at the same time we have to solve for x and y, right? So how do we solve this one? So before we can solve that, let's just try to break it down. So every single time we have a bracket and this bracket is squared, whatever value comes out of that bracket will either be greater or equal to 0. So the value will always be either a positive number or 0. If we square 0, that means our value will be 0. If we square 1, that means our value will be greater than 0. If we square 2, that means our value will always be greater than 0. If we square a negative number, we always know that we're going to get a positive number since negative multiplied by negative is positive. So whatever value comes out of the squared will always be greater or equal to 0. The only time it will be equal to 0 is because if that value is 0, and obviously any other number, if we substitute into that bracket, will be greater than 0. So with that being said, for this equation right here to make sense, since we know that this will either be greater than 0, greater or equal to 0, and obviously this one will also be greater or equal to 0, so that means if these values are either 1 or any other number except for 0, this statement will be false, because if we add two numbers that are both positive, we're only going to get a positive value, which is obviously greater than 0. So for this statement, 3x minus y all squared plus x minus 5 all squared is equals to 0, for it to make sense, that means whatever comes out of both brackets has to be 0, because if we add 0 with 0, it will give us 0. So with that knowledge, what we're going to say is x minus 5 squared has to be equal to 0. So we can solve that. That's an easy sum to solve. So from here we know that x is equals to 5, right? So now that we found the value of x, we can take that value and substitute into the first term, which is 3x minus y all squared, and then we're going to say it's equals to 0 as well. So if we substitute that value, we have 5 minus y, everything squared, is equals to 0. So now we know that that is 15 minus y is equals to 0 squared. And then now we know that y minus y will be equal to minus 15. Y is equals to 15. So that's our values. So that's a little tricky question. It's not a simultaneous equation. For many of you who try to solve it simultaneously, it wouldn't really work. But it's just a small concept that you know that you need to know, that every single time we square whatever comes out of that bracket, if we square a bracket, whatever comes out of that bracket has to be either greater or equal to 0. So knowing that little trick allows us to solve such an equation. So those will be your two values, and you're going to get a full mark of 4. So now we're going to jump straight into 1.3. So we're given x minus 2 is equals to minus 4 over x minus 2 minus 4, right? And they say that if y is equals to x minus 2, the following question says 1.3.1 says show that the given equation can be expressed as y squared plus 4y plus 4. So this if right here basically says we need to make x minus 2 y. So wherever there's x minus 2, we're just going to substitute with y. So now we're going to say y, which is x minus 2, is equals to minus 4. And at the bottom, obviously, we had x minus 2. We're going to substitute it with y minus 4, right? So we're trying to get rid of this y in the denominator. So we're going to multiply everything by y. So if we multiply everything by y, we need to multiply both sides. So we have a y squared on this side minus 4 minus 4y. Right? And then we're going to take this to the other side. We have x squared plus 4y plus 4 is equals to 0. So that's your full 2 marks right there. We're able to express it as that. So the next question, that will be 1.3.1. The next question is 1.3.2. Right? So it says hence show that the equation has real and equal roots. Real and equal roots. Alright? So for us to be able to show that, we just basically need to solve for y. So if we solve for y, just rewrite that again, plus 4. We can factorize that. When we factorize that, obviously it's a trinomial. We say y, as I said. This one tells us that the signs, this plus 4 here, this plus on the 4, tells us that the signs need to be the same. This plus 4y, this plus on the 4y, tells us that the signs need to be both positive. So what are factors of 4 that if we both multiply, they're going to give us 4, and if we multiply them, we're going to get the 4 on the 4y. So it's 2 and 2. So they are equal, the roots are equal, and they are real. So our final value will be y is equals to minus 2. So that's your full 2 marks right there. Okay, so the next question, which is 1.4, says calculate the maximum value of s if s is equal to 6 over x squared plus 2. Right? So calculate the maximum value of x. So max value of s. Right? If s is equals to 6 over x squared plus 2. So this one, remember, I just gave you a mini trick on question 1.2 and said every single time we have a bracket and we square it, the value will always be greater or equal to 0, right? Will always be greater or equal to 0. So in this situation, we have x squared. So whatever value of x that this value will be, if we square it, we'll always either get 0 or a number that's greater than 0, or positive number in other ways, right? Or in other words. So now that we know that, we need to calculate the maximum value of s. So in order for us to calculate the maximum value of x, we need to first find a value that we can substitute x into that will not add to the 2 that's already at the bottom. Because if we add to the 2, let's say for example the value is 1. So now we're going to say 1 squared, which is 1, plus 2, which is going to give us 3. So 6 over 3 is 2, right? So that's not that can't be the maximum value. So what if we make x squared 0? If we make x squared 0, that means we'll have 0 plus 2, which is obviously going to be 2, and 6 over 2 will be 3. There's no other value which we can substitute into x that give us a value that's greater than 3. Because whatever value we're going to substitute will either be positive, will always be positive, if it's not 0. So if it's positive, that means it's going to add to the 2, and if it adds to the 2, that means 6 is divided by a greater number. So in other ways, we need to make sure that whatever value that we substitute into x squared has to give us the minimum value, in a way, the smallest value when we add it to the 2. And the only value we can substitute is 0. So now, for it to make sense, we're going to say x squared has to be equal to 0. So that means x is equals to 0, right? So s will be equals to 6 over 0 squared plus 2. And knowing that, we're going to say s is equals to 6 over 2, and that will give us 3. So 3 is basically the max value. 3 is the max value. So we had to go back into our mini trick here that says whatever is squared inside a bracket will either be greater or equal to 0 in order for us to solve this one. So that's a very good trick to know. It helps you solve a lot of questions. So that will be it for this video. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe, and share it with your friends. And yeah, see you next time.